Starting off with a topic that's bound to keep you up at night, literally. Let's talk about sleep apnea and its hidden link to dementia. Now, you might think sleep apnea is just a polite way of saying you snore so loudly the neighbors know your sleep schedule. But here's the kicker. It's not just about disturbing your partner or shaking the walls. A new study led by Dr. Tiffany Braley at the University of Michigan has uncovered a disturbing link between sleep apnea and cognitive decline, particularly for older adults, and it appears to be hitting women the hardest. So what did Dr. Braley's team find? Well, this was no quick look. It's a 10-year longitudinal study, which means they followed people for a decade to figure this out. They discovered that folks with sleep apnea, especially women, are at a significantly higher risk of developing dementia. Yes, that's right. If you're sawing logs at night, it could be sawing down your brain health over time. Why? Because every time your airway closes up and your breathing stops, even for just a few seconds, your brain is jolted awake going, excuse me? Are we still alive here? Imagine this happening dozens or even hundreds of times a night. It's like trying to get through a Netflix marathon with someone who insists on pausing every 5 minutes to ask, wait, what just happened? Eventually, your brain just gets exhausted. And in this case, over time, that kind of strain seems to lead to cognitive decline. And here's where it gets interesting. This link is stronger in women. Researchers think it might have to do with hormonal differences, or maybe just the fact that women's brains have to deal with an endless mental to-do list all day. So the last thing they need is a body that forgets to breathe at night. It's almost as if our bodies come with some kind of fine print that only becomes apparent as we get older. Warning: may cause brain fog, sudden naps, and the uncontrollable urge to question life choices. So what's the takeaway here? If you or someone you love sounds like a jet engine in their sleep, maybe it's time to get it checked out. Early detection of sleep apnea could make a huge difference. It's one of those things where a quick sleep test and treatment, maybe a CPAP machine that looks like a jet pilot helmet, could be the key to keeping your mind sharp. A big shout out to Dr. Braley and her team for shedding light on this hidden risk. Because, let's be honest, aging already comes with enough surprises. Who knew that one of them would be, hey, maybe I should check if I'm actually breathing at night? Now, from sleep troubles to sugar troubles. Or in this case, lack of sugar. All right, here's one you probably didn't see coming. It turns out that rationing sugar in the first 1,000 days of life might actually be good for you. Yes, sugar rationing, possibly the least popular idea in the history of childhood, could have a surprising upside. I know, telling kids they can't have sugar is like telling them Christmas has been canceled, but stay with me on this. According to a recent study by Tadej Grachner and colleagues, restricting sugar intake during those first critical 1,000 days, roughly birth to age 3, might lower the risk of chronic diseases later in life. Grachner's team found that kids who grew up with limited sugar access in their early days seem to have better long-term health outcomes, especially when it comes to avoiding diseases like diabetes and obesity. So, what's going on here? Well, it turns out that our bodies are like really fussy plants, and the way we feed them in their early stages sets the tone for the rest of their lives. By rationing sugar during this critical period, you're essentially programming your body to process food and handle blood sugar in a healthier way. It's like setting the thermostat before you leave the house for vacation. Get it right early on, and things don't spiral out of control later. But let's be real. The concept of sugar rationing is basically every child's worst nightmare. Imagine telling a toddler, no, you can't have that cookie because we're investing in your long-term metabolic health. That's probably not going to go over well. Yet, according to this study, it might be one of the most beneficial things you could do for them. It's like a cruel but brilliant trick. Deny them sweets now so they don't end up facing health issues decades down the line. So, what's the takeaway here? Early dietary choices, especially in the first 1,000 days, might have long-lasting impacts on health. Moderation in sugar intake during those early years could be crucial, even if it makes you the least popular person at snack time. Major kudos to Tadej Grachner and her team for diving into this, because let's face it, a little short-term sugar pain could mean a lot of long-term health gain. Moving on to the lasting effects of the world's most persistent uninvited guest, COVID. If you've made it this far, you're clearly having a good time. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's free, it's easy, and it'll save you the trouble of hunting us down each week. And hey, give us a like and share with someone who could use a bit more science and a few more laughs. Go on, click away. You know you want to. Now, you might think COVID is done with us, but no. Like the worst kind of house guest, it's refusing to leave quietly. And while it might have started as a respiratory problem, it seems COVID has now decided to take a little tour around the rest of our body, making an especially extended stop at our cardiovascular system. Yes, apparently, COVID is the guest who not only overstayed its welcome, but left behind a stack of bills for us to deal with. A recent study led by Jane E. Sinclair and her team has found that people with long COVID aren't just dealing with lingering brain fog and fatigue. They're also experiencing something a bit more sinister: cardiovascular symptoms. And it's not just big, obvious symptoms. Oh no, COVID's effects are sneakier than that. Sinclair's study links these heart issues to something called trace-level cytokines, which are tiny molecules that can mess with heart cells, disrupting their function over time. Imagine your heart is trying to do its job, but there's a tiny, invisible gremlin inside, subtly pulling at all the wires. What's truly concerning here is that these cytokines don't make a big, flashy entrance. They're trace level, which means they're quietly hanging around, potentially causing long-term damage while you're none the wiser. It's like having a slow leak in your plumbing. You don't see it, but one day you wake up to find your kitchen floors underwater. COVID's cytokines might be quietly setting us up for heart issues down the line, even after we think we've recovered. And let's be clear, this isn't just affecting people with underlying conditions. Long COVID has been messing with people who were otherwise healthy and active. So it's not just a high-risk thing. COVID seems to have taken a shine to causing mischief in anyone it can get its spike proteins on. So what's the takeaway here? Long COVID might have serious, lasting effects on heart health, which means we're going to need to keep an eye on this. It's the parting gift no one asked for, and it might be sticking around far longer than any of us would like. Major thanks to Jane E. Sinclair and her team for shining a light on COVID's latest trick, because while we might all want to move on, COVID clearly has some unfinished business. And now for something a little more molecular, because what's a health roundup without some complex biochemistry? All right, here's a fun one. RNA G-Quadruplexes. No, that's not the name of a 90s techno band. It's actually a structure in our cells that scientists believe may play a big role in neurodegenerative diseases. Yes, I know. RNA G-Quadruplex sounds like something that would make even a biology major's eyes glaze over, but stick with me, because this is fascinating stuff. A study led by Kazuya Matsuo and his team has found that these RNA G-Quadruplexes act as little scaffolds in our cells. Now, scaffolds, as you might imagine, are typically meant to be helpful structures, holding things up, making sure everything's in the right place. But in this case, it's as if these RNA scaffolds got their instructions totally wrong. Instead of helping, they're actually encouraging the formation of these nasty clumps of asynuclein, a protein that has been heavily linked to neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's. Imagine this. You're building a house, and instead of supporting the walls, the scaffolding keeps attracting piles of toxic sludge. That's essentially what these G-Quadruplexes are doing. They're like the worst construction team imaginable, actively helping to create the very problems they're supposed to prevent. So, why should we care about these tiny rebellious scaffolds? Because when these toxic protein clumps build up, they can lead to serious problems for brain cells, contributing to diseases like Parkinson's. And here's the exciting part. If we can figure out how to stop these G-Quadruplexes from doing their job quite so enthusiastically, we might have a new way to tackle neurodegenerative diseases at the molecular level. So, big thanks to Dr. Matsuo and his team for their work here. While most of us were struggling to remember where we left our car keys, they were busy uncovering the inner workings of RNA structures that could one day lead to breakthroughs in treating diseases like Parkinson's. Because sometimes, the most profound discoveries are happening in the smallest, weirdest corners of our cells. And finally, let's wrap up with a topic that's become surprisingly relevant in today's world: cannabis use and its impact on future generations. Now, I know we live in an age where cannabis is going mainstream faster than kale in a Whole Foods, but here's something that might make you think twice if you're expecting. A new study led by Dr. Sarah A. Keim has found that prenatal cannabis exposure might be linked to behavioral issues in kids. Yes, you heard that right. Your kid's future ability to handle life's challenges might be impacted by that relaxing choice 9 months before they were born. Dr. Keim's study looked at children exposed to cannabis in the womb and found that by age 5, these kids were more likely to struggle with executive function and exhibit aggressive behavior. Now, executive function is basically the brain's life manager. It's responsible for things like focus, impulse control, and problem solving. Imagine your child trying to sit through kindergarten story time, but being unable to resist the urge to leap across the room because someone whispered the word snack. That's the kind of struggle we're talking about here. So, what's actually happening? The study suggests that prenatal cannabis exposure might mess with brain development in ways we're only starting to understand. And this isn't just about getting a bit hyper in class. It's about potentially facing real challenges in school, friendships, and social settings. It's like starting a video game on hard mode because a decision made before the game even began has set up extra obstacles. Now, I get it. Cannabis is increasingly accepted, and I'm not here to demonize it. But as Dr. Keim and her team have pointed out, we do need to consider potential risks, especially during pregnancy. While cannabis might seem harmless, it's important to remember that we're still learning about its long-term effects on developing brains. It's not as simple as natural equals safe. After all, arsenic is natural, but you wouldn't sprinkle it on your salad. So, what's the takeaway? As cannabis becomes more common, understanding its potential impacts on prenatal development is critical. Major props to Dr. Keim and her team for taking a closer look at this, because if we're going to keep talking about cannabis as a safe alternative, we'd better make sure we're not just ignoring the fine print for the next generation's sake. So, in summary, what have we learned today? Well, it turns out our bodies are a little bit like poorly programmed machines with side effects we'd rather ignore. We've got sleep apnea secretly plotting against our memories, sugar rationing setting up kids for healthier lives, COVID showing up in our hearts long after we thought it was gone, mysterious RNA structures accidentally building toxic brain gunk, and, as a fun plot twist, prenatal cannabis possibly making it a little tougher for the next generation to keep it together in kindergarten. And what's Biotic Chronicles' take on all of this? Well, let's put it this way. Science is full of weird, sometimes uncomfortable truths. We're here to dig through the fine print, shine a light on the research, and help you make sense of how all these discoveries might actually matter for your life. Or at the very least, make you rethink that midnight snack or decide to finally get that snoring checked out. Because while science might not always tell us what we want to hear, it's usually something we need to hear, even if we'd rather stick our fingers in our ears and hum. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this slightly alarming trip through the latest health discoveries, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this with someone who could use a dose of scientific reality, with a side of laughs, of course. We'll be back next week with more strange, fascinating, and occasionally terrifying insights from the world of science. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and maybe think twice about your nightly habits, because the fine print always finds a way to catch up with us.